Welcome back to Following Noah on a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 166, and we are entering part 3 of The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. Paul, how are you?
I am excited. We are flying through. I always say I'm excited on here, but it's true. It's true because this book is really exciting. Um, and I'm excited to talk about it with y'all. I'm excited to hear what Eliot has to say. I have to say, right quick, as a side note, this book was the one of the three in this little trilogy that I was most nervous to reread.
Okay.
Like, I didn't know if I would enjoy rereading it specifically or things like that. And I really have. I've really enjoyed it. It's really, engaging and action packed and mystery and stuff. So, anyways, that's just my side note. So,
Elliot, how are you?
I'm doing good. But I'm struggling a little bit with the pace that we've set in this book, only because it's different. We've intentionally gone quickly through the first part of this book to get to Sanderlanche type material and future books we need to get to. So going a little bit quicker through some of this has been a change of pace.
Sounds good. Last week, it ended with Elend being deposed as king from the assembly. And so that's where we pick up at the beginning of part 3. Let's go ahead and roll intro, and then we'll have Elliot do a summary of events for today. All right, Elliot, what happened
before
in our...
we,
Okay.
I'm fixing my little light over here fell.
You
I,
were rather
there was like
radiant
one
there for a
little
little bit.
smudge. Yes, sure was. There was one little smudge, and I was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna get that." And then I just watched it. Just yeah. Anyways, proceed as usual. Sorry about that.
Elliot, you want to go ahead and summarize for chapters 28 through 33 for today?
Sure thing. 28 through 33, roughly first half of part 3 here. We start out, like you said, with Elend having just been deposed by his own Congress, essentially. And it starts out with, discussion where our crew is really pushing Ellen to resist, to find a loophole, to find a way to reassert his dominance over the people and the government and not just take this lying down. And Ellen refuses. He says, "Nope, that's the law. They use the law appropriately. I'm gonna abide by this." Definitely an honorable approach there. As we move through the chapters here, Vin has several chats with Orsur, her Khandra, little dog buddy, who's following her around. They kind of delve into a couple of different topics, which we'll talk about here. Sazed is doing some more research on the rubbing that he got from the creepy Inquisitor place, so learning a few things there. Vin is still doing more reading of the logbook and theorizing about the deepness and things like that. Lots of interaction with the assembly, and we get a very interesting scene where the assembly is talking about nominating folks for king, and Lord Cett just stands up out of the crowd and says, "Oh yeah, throw my hat in the ring on that." And shortly after that, enters the city and takes up residence in the city of Luthadel with them. And then, yeah, some more discussions, and we close with Vin thinking she has potentially found the spy. Finally,
I shouldn't have laughed, but your choice of words was ironic because you said Set stands up out of the crowd, but
I didn't
he
catch that
he
until
deliberately doesn't do that because he's paralyzed. But
fair, fair. He metaphorically rises from the
yes,
crowd
yes.
to enter himself in the drawing.
Uh, anyway,
So I have to interject now too. I didn't think of that, Trevor, but I did like think Elliot was saying something funny because he said he rose up to throw his hat in the ring. I thought he was gonna throw his name in the hat, and I thought he was just messing up like the saying, like
Right.
put your name in the hat or whatever. And I just was like distracted by that the entire time, which doesn't matter at all. But that's just of course what I'm thinking about. So
Your idiom was probably better. I probably did butcher it.
Both are sayings. Both are fine.
but both are correct. I just thought you were gonna say name in the hat whenever I heard the word hat. And I thought it was a blunder, and it was not. It was well said after all. I just had to make it different in my brain.
Speaking of well said, Elend has spent the whole last year between books drafting this military code from all of the literature and all of the like biographies of history that he's been reading. He creates this checks and balances in his new government. And then his new government uses said checks and balances to depose him at the end of part 2. And then entering part 3, Doxson and Breeze are like, okay, so how are we going to take back the city? How are we going to, chokehold the assembly out of their power? How do we get you back in the throne? And Elend is like, we're not. We're gonna do what this law says and let him reelect a new king, because that's what I wrote in the book and that's what I believe. And they all kind of look at him in the scene like, you're serious, aren't you? I didn't think you were serious. So I actually really like Elend. Elend up until this point has kind of been, I'm gonna get a little hate for this, has kind of been Adolin-esque in the first 2 books of Stormlight. He's kind of just there, and the goody two-shoes kid doesn't really have much of a personality to me, except for when you get to hear the whole first half of this book, I kind of feel like has been Elend, and Elend's coming into his own character type thing. Because, first book we spend time with Kelsier and Vin. Kelsier dies. And then we get a good portion of Elend character development at the beginning of this book. So as we've gotten more of that, Elend has certainly grown on me, and I think this is where I would rank him among my favorite characters in this moment where he decides to give up the throne legally. So what do you guys think of this?
I definitely agree with you on Elend's character. I was going to say something whenever you said, I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this. I had a thought pop in my head that probably will garner more hate. And I was like, up until this point, has Elend just kind of been like the love interest for Vin,
Right.
He's done a lot more than that, but honestly, not a ton. Like, we don't see that much of him. So what we've mostly seen of Elend's character up to this point has been surrounding Vin, or in some way, shape, or form, But now it feels like in this book, now Elend is one of the point of views, is up there next to Vin, but as a main character, not as a side character, not just as a love interest.
Yeah.
And so far, I really like it. I like how we gain depth to his character. I'm really going on a little rant about Elend in general. I feel like we gain a lot of depth whenever we see him with his father, him in his father's camp. It's just like understanding how horrible his father is. Like, I feel like it adds a lot of perspective into his character. I feel like you wouldn't look at his character and how he acts and be able to tell that, but just like provides a lot of depth of his character as to like what has he been through, what has he seen, what has he been a part of, how has life been for him. Like, we know it's difficult, and I feel like we gain a lot of sympathy for him.
Yeah.
And then now we see him being just very honorable, very, I guess, trustworthy, or just, he's a rule follower, right? Maybe some would argue to a fault here, but yeah, but it's interesting. He's shaping up to be a really cool character. So
And the but potentially the influence I think that has led him down this path, or maybe unlocked this ability within him, is obviously Tyndwyl. She has been a huge influence on him with her king lessons, or whatever you want to call them. I think it's clear that
king
Ellen had
coaching
this.
or something. Yeah,
There you go.
that's,
King
that's what I'm
coaching.
gonna call it. King coaching. Yeah.
I think it's clear Elend had this character, this innate virtue within him already. Tyndwyl has just added confidence to it. She's come in and added an authority to Ellen's already kind of built in want to do the right thing, want to follow the rules. Now it's Elend who wants to do the right thing, follow the rules, and is going to stand up to you and tell you how you're wrong for wanting to cheat the rules a little bit.
Yeah. I think servant leader was already built in. But now, yeah, adding authority and confidence is certainly the was the missing piece from book 1 to book 2.
There, there's a part of one of their conversations which I thought summarized this really well. I'm gonna steal the mic here and read it for a second. Ellen smiled. You can change my clothing and my bearing, but you can't change the soul of who I am. I'll do what I think is right, and that includes letting the assembly depose me if that is their choice. Like that right there was the moment where you saw, man, he's really sticking to his guns here. He's gonna take the fall because he thinks that's the right thing to do, because that's what the law allows the assembly to do.
Do you guys think he should have put that in his code, or should he have been a benevolent dictator?
So that
Uh,
is a really big question, because it seems simple in the context of a novel. Should Ellen have made that choice? Yes or no? But what you're really asking is, what is the correct form of government for a people
No,
who have recently freed themselves from a tyrant?
no. That's not what I'm asking. No,
uh,
within.
Yeah, it is.
Well, okay,
well,
it
it
might
kind
be.
of
It
is.
kind of is. But within the context of what we have here, we have a newly freed city. We have a ska population who has never been or has never had any say in the government, and you know that you're about to have at least one, if not what turns out to be 3 armies come to take your city, whether you like it or not. um so at least for like the short term, here's my question: for should he have taken benevolent dictatorship for the short term and then written in, once I'm gone, then it goes to an assembly, and should he have taken the reins harder than he does?
It's it's still the civic question, because no matter how benevolent your current dictator is, if that's the system of government that you put in place, what does that become over time?
Right.
Yes, you stand yourself up with emergency powers to do whatever you want
Right.
for until the crisis is done, and then I'll give you back the power. Like, okay, if you have someone who's incredibly virtuous and always does the right thing, great. That is definitely going to be the most effective form of government. But the moment someone with slightly shadier motives takes that role by force, is given that role, it falls to them, inherits it, whatever. Now you've built another system that the people cannot defend themselves in. And so, for me, it absolutely comes back to the whole: uh, what kind of government are you trying to build? Are you trying to build one where the people have power? Because if you want to build a system where the people have power, they're going to have power.
That's fair. Anything else for Elend and his government? There's a big question next on the outline that I want to get to, but if we have anything else.
I think this is. I do have some thoughts on this, and my thoughts are not very helpful. It's that I think this is maybe the most difficult question us as a reader in the real world look at.
Mhm.
Like we, the reader, with our outside perspective, are like, I can look at this and, from my perspective, I could say I think Elend is the best leader for them right now, for Luthadel. It is Luthadel, right? I feel like I'm blanking on that.
It is Luthadel, yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. I know that Elend is the best leader right now for Luthadel. But if he were to, if he wrote this law, and then was outed by that law, and then tried to superimpose himself anyways, then that is like we can look at that and be like, that's pretty wrong. I mean, he would, as he is right now, I think it's safe to say he would use that for a purpose to do good. But it gets really muddy. If he does go out and does other things to be productive, to be beneficial, then it's at least not muddy. It's sad because we want him to be the leader here, but it's at least not wrong, if you will. It's still like kind of it's like a that doesn't feel quite right, but it's not wrong. And the other way is like kind of wrong. It's not like a right and wrong. It's like a 0.5 one way and 0.5 the other, or something like that. Is how I've been thinking of it.
Yeah, I guess my original question, I didn't mean for it to go super civics heavy,
Yeah.
was did what is Elend caught up too much in his civics? Would it have been right for him to take in full control of the city for the good of the people temporarily? Like his
On it,
civics books tell him no, but my question is, should he shove that for a little bit and get things done in the short term?
yeah, honestly, he should have waited a little bit to do this, I think. Like, he kind of came right out and said, all right, if you want to get rid of me, you can. And then, like, they did.
Like, great.
Like, kind of right out of the gate. And so it's like, well, I mean, that makes it tough, you know?
He also intentionally didn't go to any of their meetings, so
Right.
he he was kind of showing them the hand, if you will. Don't talk to me. I not to drag out this discussion for too long, but I contrast this in my mind to Helsier and Breeze in book one. It's a similar question of, do you violate someone's rights to do what's right for them? Do you emotionally manipulate someone to stand up for themselves and rebel against the government that's abusing them?
Right.
Is that okay? Do you take all the power for yourself so that you could defend the people even when they don't want you to be the person who's defending them? It's kind of a question in the same vein for me. And Breeze slash Kelsier take the opposite approach that Elend is taking here. Breeze will happily manipulate people to force them, question mark, to do the right thing. Whereas Elend says, nope, if they want to make the wrong choice, I'm going to let them make the wrong choice.
All right. Vin finally asked the question, I think in chapter 29, maybe, that we have been asking, or maybe it's been an unsaid question, but I feel like it's a fairly obvious one for those who think about it for a little bit. Is the deepness the mist? That seems to be an aha moment question for Vin, and she runs to Sazed and says, "I figured it out. The deepness is the mist." And Sazed kind of looks at her and says, "This is not an original thought, Vin. I'm sorry that you thought it was, but there's a couple problems with that. So the deepness claims to like have starved everybody out and killed many people and stuff like that, and the nefarious nature of some of the reports that Sazed has collected in the first half of this book seems to lead us that direction. That the mist is gaining sentience and attacking people across the Final Empire. And so Vin then comes to the conclusion, and the mist seems to be like hanging around for a couple more minutes each day or something like that, or like as the sun rises, the mist like fights a little harder to stick around, and that's the moment that Vin realizes, oh, the deepness is the mist. But Sazed points out I think two big problems with that. One, if the deepness was the mist, why does the mist still come if we defeated the mist? So, or if we defeated the deepness. So, Lord Ruler present or not, if the Lord Ruler defeated the deepness, why does it still come during the night? And why does it still come during the night when the Lord Ruler's dead? Second question, why was the mist not around for the logbook? Did I say that right? What the mist was not present when the logbook was written, and the deepness was. So that's a problem. If you're not writing about the mist, but you are writing about the deepness, then Sazed's arguing they can't be one and the same thing.
And I was definitely thinking along the lines of, wait, but that's way too obvious.
Right.
When the deepness was first mentioned, the very first time, of course, the mist is exactly the first thing I thought of. Ooh, a dark, shapeless evil, something that's kind of everywhere and got defeated. Oh, you mean kind of like the mist that's everywhere? That clearly can't be the deepness because the deepness has been defeated. Immediately I go down that train and dismiss that thought quickly. So for Vin to arrive at this as this big old epiphany is kind of a head scratcher for me. Of like, hmm, I I feel like I mentally dismissed that as an option at 800 pages ago.
Right.
I mean, no logical basing for this, but I was kind of on Ven's side. It's a great way to start a sentence. Yes, no logic in this, no thoughts. Just like reading through the story and hearing Ven say that she thinks it's the mist. I like, I don't know. I just agreed. I was like, I think she's right, even though I didn't know anything. I'm like, that sounds cool. Like the mist is the deepness. I have no further explanation, no further thoughts in that. I'm just like, yeah, I think that's it. The end. Uh, don't even know what that means yet. We don't even understand like really what the deepness like is or does or was or whatever.
I I will say, without going into spoilers, I was quick to mentally not consider the mist as the deepness in book one. I would be more inclined to revisit that, given the fact that we took a detour and went and read Yumi and the Nightmare Painter.
Okay.
And I don't even need to get into spoilers because if you've read it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I I could reconsider my position based on a completely unrelated book and story somewhere very different in the Cosmere.
That's fair. We can talk about that more um at the end, and I'll leave it at that. But there is something that I want to bring up. Maybe a little elephant in the room for those of us, or for the listeners who have read the whole Cosmere and then followed along with us in our detour of Yumi. That I feel like there's there's a big acknowledgement that we really haven't acknowledged on this podcast for Elliot specifically, but we can talk about that later. So Sazed at the beginning of part 2 creeps into creepy Inquisitor castle with Marsh, right? He takes a rubbing of this inscription And in this episode, he really gets to sit down, and I think he reads it, like the whole thing for us. Does he not? I think he reads the whole thing. And
If not most of it, yeah.
yeah, like from beginning to end, like there's a whole taped off section of this was the rubbing. And what did you think of did you get anything out of it, Elliot?
Couple, couple notes. Nothing concrete yet. It's not only is it like the epigraphs, it literally is the epigraphs.
Okay.
And so it comes in the form of information that is clearly important, but intentionally without enough context for you to know why.
Right.
And so it's one of those things where I start taking notes on it, but I can't really make assumptions on it yet. I'm trying to review here to make sure this is the section that it talks about it. Is this where we get the name Quan, or is that elsewhere?
I think it is.
No, I'm not seeing it. If we get that maybe later in the same chapter. Anyway, I wrote down that we just oh no, here it is. Yeah. So we discovered that the author of this inscription, his name is Juan, Worldbringer of Terrace, and I think Sazed muses on that term Worldbringer, referencing it as a like precursor order to the Keepers, basically the the knowledge sustainers of the time before him. So maybe kind of a distant ancestor in a way, intellectual ancestor perhaps of Sazed himself
Yeah.
writing this down. But Juan himself is somewhat of a quandary in that he like enjoy that he
No.
he threw that in just for you. The he like contradicts himself in his own writing. He like doesn't trust himself. He's talking about Elendi, the hero of ages. I've discovered him. I've brought him to the fore. Oh, and by the way, I'm a complete fraud. And like it's like, okay, buddy, not sure what you're going on and on about. Again, I don't quite have enough context to figure out what you're talking about, but yeah, I think that's all I learned from that excerpt.
Fair enough. If you didn't, I do want to talk about that, but I can't talk about it without spoilers, unfortunately. So I'm not even going to
I
try.
can imagine.
Okay. The there's a big assembly meeting, and Cett reveals himself that he's in the city, and he clearly has some supporters from the Ska Merchant cast of the assembly. So Cett takes refuge in one of the abandoned keeps, all of from the old Final Empire, where the old lords used to sit, and now Cett is in the city. Elliot, did you see this coming?
Nope. Not at all. I also was caught off guard by the fact that you mentioned this at the beginning that I neglected to reference in my intro. Not only does Set sneak into the city, assert himself at the very assembly where they're talking about what they need to do to protect the city against him, nominate himself for king, he's also apparently a cripple and wields this impressively authoritarian figure, and yet can't even stand above those around him. You pretty much always mentally attribute, a very domineering type character with someone who's tall and big and who like walks into the room and demands attention just by their figure. That's like when we read about Strath Venture, I can't not picture some kind of bulky person behind that persona. Set comes in wielding a kind of similar in a lot of ways, very full of himself, very confident personality, and yet he's a cripple. He can't even stand up to address the assembly. So fascinating character here.
Yeah. I I think Cett is the most interesting antagonist that we've had in this series so far. The up until this point, everything in the way of our heroes has kind of felt pretty black and white. Cett's an interesting one.
He's incredibly blunt,
Yes.
and I feel like I relate with Elend in this moment, and that he's so blunt, it's off-putting. We've just come from Straff Venture, who is constantly manipulating, constantly posturing, constantly trying to get his way or assert his dominance. And then Set just comes in and says, "Well, just make me king." Why? Because you should. Because I'll kill you if you don't. Like just, straight up. He's almost so obvious and straight to the point that you're not sure if you can trust him. Like, are you just being brutally honest all the time? Or are you doing that on purpose to try and throw me off? Like, I'm with Elend because I think Elend feels that way.
Yeah. I'm interested where it goes with Cett, because now he's in the city. He has a fortification of his own. I'm curious if there's a lot of frenemies in this book. The Straff and Cett are frenemies now. Elend and Cett are frenemies now. There's a Koloss army showing up who's not friends with anyone except for maybe Elend, because Jastes is at the head of the Koloss army. But does that really matter? I don't know. It kind of there's some interesting dynamics about to take place, I think. What else? Anything else?
Definitely struck me as a phenomenally terrible idea for the assembly to vote to allow Set to enter the city with a small army to take up residence so they can negotiate with him. Like it I think it's plausible and that Set has them pretty terrified and maybe awestruck with his power play of showing up at the assembly. So I believe that it might happen of a terrified assembly, but what a horribly what are you thinking moment where warlord on your doorstep wants to take over your city. He walks in and says, "Hey, can I stay?" And you say, "Yeah, sure. There's an empty keep over there. You can have that one." I'm I'm over here saying, "What?"
Elend, I think Elend's the only one that votes against it, and the vote's like 23-1 or something.
Something like that. I
Because
was
he threatens that his army's instructed to attack at dawn, assuming he doesn't return. And so they're like, "Okay, you can do whatever you want."
yeah, Set's definitely got the upper hand. I'm not quite sure what the right word is. Conversationally, he's got the momentum going his way, and everyone else is just kind of uh, going with it.
He has the word you're looking for is actually a hip new term called the Riz. Set actually uses the Riz here. If
Hold on,
you're
can we
unfamiliar
pause?
with the term,
Does Eliot really not know what this word means?
the Riz.
Elliot has no idea what this
Oh
word
my
means.
goodness.
I'm about to explain it. So, the Riz, for those of you who have not heard the term, is the new hip kids' way of saying just charisma. Like you got the Riz, you have
Okay.
charisma, and it's just being smooth. It's being likable. It's having a presence, kind of when you walk in the room or when you're talking to someone, right? And that's all he really has. He's in here in the middle of enemy territory, essentially, and just says like, "Hey, I'll be your king," and it's just like that's some, you know, some Chad alpha male energy. He walks in there with the Riz, and and that's where we are. So that's kind of what he has going for him. It's almost like I think of the phrase "fake it till you make it." I feel like he walks in and he's just gonna be like, "Yeah, I'll be your king," and like really sell it really hard, even though like looking at it, like take a step back, look at it, be like, "No, that's a horrible idea. We don't want you to be our king." But like he's gonna push it. He's gonna try and grab that like initial interest and initial thought, make an interesting point, and then try to have everyone be like, "Dang, we should just give the city to him." You know, that'd be way better than dying, right? You know.
All right, I'm interested. We're gonna do a poll. Comment below if one, if you knew what Riz meant before the beginning of the episode, and two, if you did not. And we're gonna see roughly the age demographic of our audience
Yes.
for down below. So let us know if you knew what Riz meant before the beginning of the episode.
For context, also, I feel like I should legally include that I volunteer with a local youth group, and so that's why I know the hip terms. So
I have no such excuse. I'm just
I apparently
I'm just terminally online, so that's my
Yeah.
excuse.
I apparently do not hang out enough with the youth of today because I just added a new word to my vocabulary.
Yeah, Riz. He's got Riz. It's a good one. It's a good one.
I feel smarter.
All right. Vin is still trying. I feel like this was dropped on us in part 1 and this has not moved anywhere since. She is still trying to find the Conjure imposter among the palace staff / her inner circle. And I think the last person in the crew is Doxson, right? And they have a conversation. And she approaches Doxson and asks him, "Do you still feel the same way you felt 2 years ago?" And she like purposely makes the question vague to see if he can recall exactly what she's talking about. And Sanderson writes it in a way where he responds vague at first, to where he kind of makes you think, wait, so he's not playing his cards either, doesn't know what she's talking about. And then it turns out he does know what she's talking about. And at least in Vin's mind, Doxson is cleared by the end of the episode here. So that leaves one person kind of in the inner circle, and I wouldn't even call him in the inner circle. He's just kind of there right now. And that's Demu. And at the end of chapter 33, Demu is sneaking out of the palace, and Vin immediately, like, it was on her mind anyway, but Vin immediately assumes, oh, this guy's sneaking out to go give someone information or something like that. So then assumes that Demu is the imposter. So I guess there's some movement there. And we've certainly gotten eliminations up until this point. Maybe once per episode, there's a crew member that's eliminated from the list. So is there anyone on the inner circle that is not confirmed at this point besides Doxson, which is a most likely no? I think everybody's cleared except for maybe Elend.
And I think Vin even thinks about Ellen at one point where she's like, okay, I think I've cleared everyone but Elend, but surely it can't be Elend. And so she moves on. The only one I'm trying to remember is clubs. Did we clear clubs yet? I think we hit everybody else.
No, we haven't done clubs yet. We have not
I
done
think
clubs
maybe
yet.
clubs might be the one that's left.
Okay.
But I did feel like Vin's evidence here for Captain Demu was pretty circumstantial. She she literally looks out her window, sees him sneaking out of the castle, and she thinks to herself, "Ooh, he's acting really sneaky. Must be him. Mystery solved. Done." And she's like 100% convinced. 100%, no doubt in her mind. And the chapter, "Oh, must be him. He's sneaking out." And
Okay, Vin.
I am less than convinced, I'll say that.
What do, what do we know about Demu at this point? Has he done anything cool?
He's kind of just been almost an extra at this point. Like he's always
Mm-hmm.
in the scene, but never really has more than a short line. He's there to support. He watches the stuff. Yeah, not really.
Yeah, anywhere where there's more than like 4 people in the meeting, he's kind of just there.
Right.
In the first book, he was the loyal captain to Kelsier who keeps half the army safe, but other than that, he really has not done that much.
Which to maybe argue for Vin's case here, I mean that is exactly the style of a spy. They're just kind of always there. They kind of just always end up in the room they need to be in to hear the stuff.
Right.
And they're not they're not saying too much. They're kind of flying under the radar. You barely notice them. So if come the end of this, it is Demu who's this Khandra undercover spy, I'm not going to be shocked. It's going to be like, oh, okay, I can see that. I'm just highly questionable of Vin's body of evidence so far that I think is a little slim.
Fair enough. Anything else before we get into a little further Cosmere spoiler territory?
Do you have a thought, Paul? You look like you have a thought before I jump in.
I do have a thought, and my thought is actually that I'm really excited to talk about it in Stormlight spoiler context.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. One quick thing before we go there. I stumbled upon a quote in chapter 33 that just grabbed me because I felt like it did a really good job of summing up the entire Mistborn series thus far. It's a it's a conversation. I gotta find it on the page. It's a conversation about Doxson and Kelsier and Vin. We're in Vin's perspective at this point, and she's chatting. I think this is Doxson. He's rambling. No, it's not Doxson. This might be Vin's thoughts. I think this is Vin's thoughts. She says this: Doxson held some of that same hardness. Kel and Dox weren't evil men, but there was an edge of vengefulness to them. Oppression had changed them in ways that no amount of peace, reformation, or recompense could redeem.
Hmm.
And I just read that thinking, wow, that's kind of our whole story so far. We have heroes. We have people who are trying to do the right thing, but they have this edge to them. They have this chip on their shoulder or this hardness, as Vin says, that comes from the oppression of their past. They've seen such horrible things that we've gotten exposed to occasionally. The torture loving inquisitors, the just tyrannical rule of the Lord ruler, the broken politics, all of this whole system meant to oppress others. And like the question is kind of left out there, can you have a hero in a world like this? Can you have someone who's not scarred by such evil and doesn't carry that hardness with them? Like that really got me thinking of that's partially turned me off of this story a little bit, and that our heroes are a little bit gray. They're a little bit gray. They have maybe an edge to them where you kind of wonder sometimes, he's Kelsey, or he's a survivor, he's the bringer of hope, and he kind of does some questionable stuff sometimes. And you've got Breeze, who he's a hero. We know he wants, what's good at heart, but at the same time, he's not going to question manipulating someone to get what he wants. That's kind of our running theme here, I feel, is it's a world with heroes, but it's a dark world and kind of comes with dark heroes.
I like that. I like that summary at least. I don't know if I like the concept, but I do like the
Yeah,
kind of wrapping the whole thing up in that one concept.
Vin summarized it for me well, so I had to share.
That's good. Anything else before we get into Stormlight stuff?
Not over here.
All right. You are warned because this is about to get real heavy real fast. Should we get into what we previewed with Yumi earlier first, or should we get into this other topic that we have on the outline?
I feel like the Yumi reference is a pretty quick one, but then you made a comment making it seem like there's more to it. So I'll make my simple comment and then let you build on it as apparently you want to. All that I was referencing is the shroud
Right.
in on Yumi's planet, which gosh, can't even remember the name of it now because it's only mentioned like once at the very end.
It starts with a K. Kanok?
Mm,
No.
don't bother
Kamashi?
Yumi's
me.
planet.
Ko
Come on. I think you're right.
something
Maybe.
The
something like that.
Yumi's planet that may or may not be named Kamashi.
Yes, Yumi's
On
planet.
on that place, of course, we have this long drawn out story with the shroud, and we finally learn that okay, the shroud is investiture. It is a being. It is like the souls of people. It arguably has a sentience to it. In Mistborn 1, I'm very quick to dismiss the mist in Mistborn 1
You dismissed it?
as I did. I ugh, now the words are jumbling together in my brain. I dismissed the mist because I did not need to tie it to the deepness. Seemed too obvious. Gone. Then we go read Yumi, which is all about a dark, swirling, misty thing that's maybe a little thicker than that soup mist that very much has powers and influences the story. So now I walk into Mistborn 2 very much thinking, maybe I need to reconsider my mist as a bigger part of the story here. So when Vin jumps on the whole, oh, clearly the mist is deepness, again with her whole conjure theory, I'm quick to dismiss her evidence, but maybe I'm not fully against her theory.
Right. So what I'm asking myself genuinely, because I don't remember the answer to this. So at the end of Yumi, one of the big reveals is how the shroud got there. That Hoyt sits us down and gives us a history lesson of, oops, we made a machine that churns out investiture into, I don't remember what the goal of it was. But it's gonna grab investiture that it finds or the Heon lines, and turns out there's a little bit of investiture in everybody, so it's just gonna start grabbing souls and churning out stuff. So now my question, returning back to Mistborn, is okay, where did the mist come from? Because
Sure.
there seems to be that there are plenty of authors who would just give you a planet and say this is a planet and there's mist on it at night, and never explain it or give you any reason as to why. Brandon Sanderson is not one of them. He will always, and maybe this is, maybe I'll be proven wrong here, because I don't remember if this is true or not. He will always give you a reason for something being weird. On a planet. That so here's something weird about this
Or
planet, and here's why, because there's this weird thing that happened a long time ago.
and it seems clear too, even if that reason never shows up in his story, he still has one
Right.
and will happily accidentally drop it at a convention if you ask him about it.
Right.
Like there's always a reason. It's just a question of are you gonna get it exposed to you in the story.
Right. So because the shroud was such a big plot point of how it got there, and that was a big reveal in the end of Yumi, now I'm coming back to Mistborn and wondering, okay, how did the mist get there? Because it's been explicitly told to us that it was not there pre Well of Ascension, not the book, the place, pre the, I should say the Lord Ruler. It was not there pre the Lord Ruler. The Lord Ruler takes his place. The mist somehow shows up, and then the Lord Ruler is
Oh.
gone, and now the mist is still there. I'll let you epiphanize here in a second, Eliot. But it was also briefly mentioned Mistborn at the end of last book. Mistborn did not exist before the mist, and Vin has a one line of dialogue in her internal thinking of like, I always just thought Mistborn had to do with we jump around at night, but maybe it has some more literal connotation. So there is obvious food for thought there of where did the mist come from and why. So now that's where I'm at after reading Yumi.
I'll take your thought one further. Again, kind of playing off some ideas maybe inspired by Yumi. In Yumi, the machine sucks up all the people and then belches out this soul soup, which is the shroud. What if our mist on Mistborn on Scadrial is the deepness defeated? What if the deepness was a more confined, specific monster, being, or whatever? Lord Ruler defeats it, it then dissipates into the mist.
Oh, okay.
So the mist is the defeated state of the deepness. And what's happening now, for some unknown reason, now that the Lord Ruler's gone, and what Vin is maybe experiencing is maybe the deepness is reforming.
Hmm.
Maybe it's slowly in this process of recovering and reshaping itself into the deepness. And so maybe mist is not necessarily perfectly equivalent to deepness, but it is the safe, the defeated version of the deepness, and it's slowly forming itself back into the dangerous version.
Okay.
That I, I, that might be an official theory. That might be an official theory at this point.
Okay. Is the so before the Lord Ruler defeats it, is the deepness just like some malevolent cloud like that wanders around the final empire and you have to run away from it? High storm style, I guess.
Yeah, or even a monster, like a literal bee monster. Think Nightmare from Yumi, an
Okay.
actual creature
Yeah.
with corporeal form, and upon being defeated, breaks up into this much less harmful mist. And it's now that the Lord Ruler is not there to stop it, it is reforming its power, it's gathering up the ability to reform itself into that creature it was before.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. All right. What else? There's a big one. There's a reveal in chapter 33 that we didn't want to talk about until we had some other context. What is it?
It's our
I got
shard friends.
I got
The
excited about
mention of
this.
our friends, at least.
I got excited about this, and I felt a little guilty getting excited about this because a first-time Mistborn reader is 100% for sure not going to know what is happening here if they don't have other Cosmere knowledge and a lot of other Cosmere knowledge.
Yeah.
You can probably have read 3 or 4 or 5 other Cosmere books and still not know what just got referenced here in chapter 33. And I almost feel guilty that I do, simply because I've just kind of been around this world for 3+ years now. I've picked up enough knowledge from studying other books and talking about it with you guys that when in chapter 33, Orsur and Vin are having a conversation, and Orsur just casually drops, "Oh, and by the way, you humans are of ruin, and we Khandra are of preservation." And both of those words are conveniently capitalized. I immediately key in on them and say, "Aha, aha." I don't have proof yet, but I do have vague references to it from elsewhere and enough Cosmere knowledge to put together that this has got to be a reference to our shards.
Specifically two, and that's important because
Yeah.
we learned, I believe in Arcanum, that the shards were supposed to agree to settle separately. And any shard that settles near another shard, there's going to be issues. And we've read 4,000-page Stormlight books on why that's the case. So now with that knowledge and the reveal that there's 2 shards on Scadrial, you can start to reframe. You can start to reframe the story or what's happening on Scadrial a little bit differently with that knowledge, or at least there were there were 2 shards influencing it at one time. It remains to be seen if they're still here, but I'll say that.
Paul, I've got a question for you and your perspective. When you read this the first time, one, were you reading closely enough? And two, did you have enough Cosmere knowledge to notice this now in this moment?
So at the time that I was reading this, even for the first time, I did recognize this. I did understand ruin and preservation. Those are shards. You are of ruin. We are of preservation. My red flags went off pretty quick. I probably didn't spend that much time dwelling on it. I probably didn't sit here and theorize too much, which is why I'm glad we get to do so now. That I get to do so with y'all. But I kind of took it in passing, but it like definitely had my guard way up, or my sensor way up for anything else that would be happening. I did try to think like the Khandra versus the rest, like ruin versus preservation, are like. I mean, we know the Khandra are very different, but are they like? I don't know. Like, there's just a. I feel like I have the outline of a puzzle, but none of the like middle of the puzzle, you know. And so, I didn't really know what to make of it at that point.
Trevor, you asked an interesting question or alluded to it as you were talking about that, which was like, what does this tell us about the current state of Scadrial?
Right.
And all we have to go off of right now are 2 words: ruin and preservation. But I feel like based on what we know generally about shards, there's a lot we can infer based on simply their names.
Right.
And the fact that you have 2 extremely different concepts, ruin and preservation, that seems like 2 things that would be actively trying to achieve opposite goals. One is trying to destroy, one is trying to preserve. Like, yeah, that seems like it would come with a lot of conflict.
Yeah. There. I don't remember if we do get this or not. I hope there's a Scadrial history lesson somewhere. Like, but within. I want to know what has happened between ruin and preservation to get to this point, and maybe once it may not be in era 1, it may not be in era 2, I don't remember, but I would love to hear what has happened between ruin and preservation. So yes, it's a name drop for you, Eliot. I don't know if it means that much for a first time Mistborn
Yeah.
reader. You'll read it and I'm trying to imagine, because I was not a first time Cosmere reader reading Mistborn, so I at least was mildly aware. Here's what I'll say on this. As Vin discovered more of her powers, and as I was listening at work, I texted Tim and I said, what if Vin is using the same magic system that Kaladin is using? Like, what if Vin is a Knights Radiant? I think was my text. And Tim replies to me and says, well, do you know about the Cosmere, capital C? And this is after I'd read the first 3 Stormlight books and then immediately picked up Mistborn. And so I didn't know about like an interconnected universe at that point. No one had told me. So when I thought I was original and cool, thinking like, wait, what if Kaladin's powers are tied to Vin's powers? And that's what I was texting Tim about. And he's like, well, do you know about investiture, capital I? I'm like, no. And so then he gave me a little bit of a lesson. He's like, well, they're two different magic types, but they're within the same world. So feasibly, one person out of Mistborn could meet somebody out of Stormlight. That's all he said. And so then from there, I started building. Okay, I can kind of piece together what applies on Scadrial and what does not, based on that kind of base level knowledge I had reading the Well of Ascension. I knew that there was possibility of overlap, but that this was something clearly different. So, bring that back to Ruin and Preservation. What we know of shards is they're rather stubborn in their intention and their goal. So
one track.
Yes, they're 1/16th of a person in their intent, capital I intent. So preservation, I don't know if preservation. Let's take preservation just for their own shard for a second. If preservation were to take their own system, I feel like that would be a pretty crappy system because nothing would ever. The change equal bad for preservation, right? Like by definition, I'm going to keep everything exactly as it is. Well, if you live in a utopia, great. You know, like if you've invented everything there is to invent, if you know everything there is to know, great. And then Ruin, if Ruin were to have its own system, that would also be a very poor place to live because what's the physics term where everything like is in a natural Yeah, thank you. Where everything is naturally going to break apart into single atoms eventually or something like that. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. Entropy, is that the term?
Yeah, the gradual decline into disorder is how it's often
there you go.
defined.
So I feel like Ruin would be the king of entropy, where everything is eventually going to break apart. So if you take both Ruin and Preservation, put them together on one planet, that obviously two very opposing forces, and I at least would lean towards Preservation's going to be the better of the two shards, or the more good, if you will, of the two shards. But if you take it from like a purely zoomed out perspective, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. That they're just two opposing forces. Ethics aside, they're just going to be trying to accomplish different things.
Yeah, very, very much so. That makes a lot of sense and perhaps gives at least me a new way to think about Scadrial, which even having heard these names before, Ruin and Preservation, I didn't have a context to put them in, and now I do. Now I know what Scadrial looks and feels like. So to now take these two words and kind of juxtapose them with what I know of the ash covered Scadrial, I can start to go, okay, maybe I start to look for where's Ruin's influence, where's Preservation's influence, and things might start to. I feel like things might start to fall in place. Maybe that's just me hoping, but
we shall see.
I will say two specific things do jump out at me as I don't want to jump to say as aligned with these two, but seem to be related. When I read Ruin, I immediately think of the deepness. The deepness has been kind of told to us as a evil or destroying force. It seems to be a destroying force. I've stopped the deepness from destroying everything, potentially Ruin, or have something somewhat in some way to do with Ruin. Preservation, I actually think of the Lord Ruler.
Yeah.
What did the Lord Ruler do? Preserved himself for thousands of years, or 1,000 or 2,000. So I, again, don't know quite where to go with that yet, but I'm now starting. I'm going to start to categorize, I think, maybe on some things. And those are my first two entries in my ruin and preservation categories.
Not the two that are given to you in the book, the humans and
Oh,
Contra.
of course, yes, but that's okay. Yes, given to me, but of less immediate interest to me.
Right.
Relevant to the greater story, yeah, very potentially. Humans of ruin, Conjure of preservation, okay, that could be very helpful later. But in my immediate puzzle of trying to unravel who the heck is what and what I need to care about, I'm going to start trying to put those kinds of things into either the ruin bucket or the preservation bucket.
Sounds good. Anything else?
Oh, one brief note that we missed in here. Orsur talks about humans and Khandra, but also mentions one other being, Holos. Holos are in the same exact conversation and are mentioned specifically in relation to Khandra.
Okay.
He he makes some vague comments, which the conversation is a little long, so I probably won't go read it. But he basically says humans are of ruin, Khandra are of Kolos. No, sorry, Khandra are of preservation. Holos are the pawns in this whole thing, and my people always feel bad for them because we kind of share this thing. And Vin's like, whoa, 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 wait, what? And he's like, sorry, I shouldn't have said anything. Moving on. And it's like, oh, okay. Khandra and Kolos. Weird. Weird.
I don't remember any ties between them, so I'm not sure how much use I'll be here.
He says impressively with a straight face.
Uh-huh. I will say that I do know, and so I will not say anything. That's my tactic here.
The answer is and always will be till we finish them all. Read and find out, I guess.
That's true. But one quick thing that Elliot has in the outline that we didn't get to touch on, the term world bringer was
Oh,
brought
yeah.
up, and that is one letter away from a different term that we've received in the past. So what did you is there any parallels here?
Oh, as soon as I read that, I the conspiracy theory started to blossom. I became like that guy in the meme with the red threads on the wall tying this to that because I thought it was the same thing.
Hmm.
When I read it and it said Juan the Worldbringer, I was like, we know Worldbringers. So I whip open my Stormlight book, I flip through it, I'm like, I remember this. It's Hoyd and his guy whose name I'm blanking on right now.
Say no. I always call him Says it. Shoot.
Sigzil.
Right?
Thank you. He's one of my
Sigzil, thank
favorite
you.
characters. How did I forget his name? Sigzil.
Yes, I agree.
Yes. And so I'm like, oh, Hoyd and Sigzil, they're Worldbringers. Oh, wait, nope. They're World Singers.
Singers, yes.
Not World Bringers. Way to make that intentionally confusing, Brandon. But they seem to fill similar roles. The World Singers on Roshar seem to fill a similar purpose as world bringers on Scadrial and keepers like Sazed, and that they are the sharers of knowledge or the custodians of knowledge, perhaps the tellers of stories, the maintainers of history, if you will. So it seems like very, very similar, different planet, 2 letters different in their name. Gosh darn it, I was about to spin crazy theories for hours on end and was not able.
So I have thoughts on this though. What if there was one original world? I don't know, something else. World dancer, let's say, for example, and he, like, almost similar to Hoyd, has like been to all the systems and stuff, and basically started this whole like world, whatever order on each one, but like, you know,
He had 4
he
kids:
got
World Bringer, World Singer, World
Yes.
Stalker. There you go.
and world, you know, yeah, who knows? Submit your world singer parallel names below. But so my thought with this is kind of sad because Sigil is one of my favorite characters. In the bridge crew, like probably one of my very favorite bridge members from his when we first met him. I will say the whole point that he is a world singer felt really important for a little while, and now it's not really anything. It's not much. There's not much to it. I'm like, it's awesome. Whatever your scope is kind of zoomed in, and you meet someone who's like, oh, I basically know everything about all the places in Roshar or on Scadrial or wherever, you know, and that's fantastic. But here, I'm given Sigil's character, how it pans out, it makes me think that this is probably just a little detail. It may not be that big. It may just be a title to sound super important, and it does have importance when you're zoomed in. But in the full scope of our story, I don't know if it'll be that important.
Fair enough. All right. Anything else for episode 166, gentlemen?
No, don't think so.
All right. Let's reconvene next week. We will be closing part 3. And I will see you guys then. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Elliot.
Bye for now.
Doodles.